Today's daf is daf Chof in Baba Basra. Yesterday the discussion was, and we said it turned that way because of this ram. Discussion was about making the opening, the hole between, let's say, a wall, room number one that had a dead body, room number two, that we're trying to prevent the tumah from going in there. And if there's got a hole in the wall between the two, a window or a hole, whatever you want to call that, if it's a paseach tefach, the tumah can be transmitted from room number one into room number two. How do you diminish or make that the hole smaller? So we talked about different ways, and we said it can't put a kli there because if it's a kli that's makabel tumah, something that's makabel tumah that can become tameh, it can become defiled, cannot be a partition preventing tumah from coming in because it itself is makabel tumah. So we can't be talking about a metal item. What can we talk about? We talk about many things, but things that have to be left there or that won't disintegrate. So we'll go back. We'll just take it again from the fourth line on the page. We had this yesterday. Let's say grass or herbs that were plucked, and you put them in that window, in that hole, that aperture, whatever you want to call that, to try to diminish it. They grew by themselves into the windows. Or you had a little rag, a shmata or something that wasn't 3 by 3 etzbot, so it's too small to be a kli. Or if it's a limb, let's say you had a limb or a piece of meat that was hanging off, that an animal had come across some thorns or something, and it got a piece of a limb or some of its flesh was hanging off from its side. The animal was still alive. Or you had a bird that nested in the window. All these things we'll see can diminish the size of the window. We'll see why. Or a goy, we'll say a goy we'll see stuck there. He couldn't move. Ben Shmona, or an 8-month baby that cannot live. Also, it's a mukti. You're not allowed to move it on Shabbos, whatever. You're not going to move that baby. Ben Shmona hamunach b'chalon, melech or salt, the klecheres, or earthenware vessel, the sefer Torah. All these things diminish the size of the window, the opening between room number one and number two, so that the tumah will not go from one to two. Avo, hashelig, if you have snow, borod, hail, glit, all this is ice, frost, all these things are basically water. Even if they're in a frozen state, they're going to melt. Cool and amatum. They don't make the hole any smaller because they're not really going to last very long. Well, Asavim here is our question. That's why we brought down this whole Gemara over here about tumah. They're good for your animal, right? So if they're good for your animal, so you are going to take it away from the hole. So why do you say that it stays there? We're talking about like poison herbs, poison grass. So you're not going to get the emerald. Osha olam or it grew by itself. We went on to say that if it's grass that either was plucked or that was put there by itself, or keep the kosher koso, we just said that was the whole idea. That's what this whole section of the Gemara is talking about. That these things are bad for a wall. You shouldn't plant your seeds near a wall because they will break up the earth and the wall won't be strong anymore. Just keep them there bad if they're bad for the wall, shakal, you're going to remove it. So here's our point: if leaves or grass or anything growing, seeds are bad for the wall, so you are going to take it away from the wall. So if you're going to take it away from the wall, why does it function as a part of the wall, meaning that it closes up it diminishes the size of the hole in the wall? Because you're going to leave it there, but you're not going to leave it there. It only diminishes the size of the hole if you're going to leave it there permanently. But over here, since the grass or herbs, whatever's growing there, is bad for the wall, you're going to remove it. So it shouldn't diminish the size of the hole. We're talking about the wall of a ruin. So you're going to leave it there because you don't care about the wall. The wall is a ruin anyway. We're talking about a wall in an inhabited area, but we're talking about where the grass or the herb or the seeds, whatever, are not growing right next to the wall. They're coming 3 tefachim away from the wall, and it's sort of hanging over the wall. But it's not really there. Therefore, it doesn't diminish the size. It doesn't diminish the earth around the wall. And it's not going to hurt the wall itself. Okay, so now we just go through the other things in the midst. So we're really done with our issue of seeds on a wall. Yes, you shouldn't plant near a wall, not because we said yes, not because the seeds will grow into the wall, but rather because they ruin the earth around the wall. Matlunius, what about, you say you have a rag there less than 3 by 3. If it's less than 3 by 3, so it's not considered a garment, which is a kli, if it's a kli, So you could say that that a kli, if it's makabel tumah cannot be chotzeis from the tumah. But here we're talking about it's less than 3x3. But still, it's chazul, the kriya, the labush. You could use it for a patch. So why do you say that you're going to leave it there? You say all these things, you're going to leave them in the wall, and then therefore it diminishes the size that hold the wall. But over here, it's good for a patch. The answer b'smicha is very thick, not good for clothing. So chazlum is good for a cupper, person who draws blood, because they'll use it like as a, to wipe off the blood, to wipe off the loose blood. Bariska, where it's like sackcloth, very rough. Bariska, if it's talking about a sackcloth, shem b'shalosh and shalosh, why do you say it doesn't have 3x3? Shem arba al arba. It's got to be 4. It doesn't mean abbas. It should be arba al arba. I think it's means sackcloth. It's got to be 4x4 tfachim. 4x4 tfachim, right? Which would be, arba al arba. Yeah, shalosh al shalosh really should be shlosh al shlosh probably. Shalosh al shalosh etzbos. No, arba al arba is also etzbos. It should be arba al arba. Etzbos, not arba al arba tfachim. We're talking about etzbos. We're talking about the size of finger breadths. So it should be arba al arba. The Gemara many times. Maybe it's the printer, they put arba instead of arba. It should probably be arba al arba. In any case, why do you talk about if it's sackcloth? Why do you say if it's less than 3x3? Then it's not a kli, it's not a beged. If it's sackcloth, it's up to 4x4. Even if it's over 3x3 finger breadths, it's still not considered a kli. The answer is shavava. It should say arba al arba. It says kain risk. It doesn't really mean that it's sackcloth. Real sackcloth is not a kli unless it's 4x4. It's not a beged unless it's 4x4. This is really less than that. It's really like a regular rag or a matlis or a shmata that the shiur is 3x3 for it to be a beged, but it's still rough. It's still rough, and therefore you're not going to use it. The cupper is not going to use it to wipe off the blood on his hand or the patient's hand, arm, or whatever they drew through the blood because it's too rough and it'll hurt the skin. Okay, another thing we said was that an animal who had a loose limb that was the limb of his animal of our bas medovlin. Let's say he had a limb of his, maybe the limb was loose, or maybe just means the limb was sitting there. The basar medovlin, or flesh that was hanging off the animal, ubachaya, or a wild animal. So why do you say over there that that's considered, that diminishes the size of the hole? The animal's going to run away. Arkavaz, it's going to get up and go away. Why would the animal stay there? But true, the animal's tied there. That's why it diminishes the hole, because the animal's tied to that place, to that wall, to shachalei. So he'll shecht it. Why do you say he's going to leave the animal there? Think about it. The animal's there. He's got to feed the animal, tie it up. Maybe he'll shecht it. But to me, it's not a kosher animal. So Mazmanechas will sell it to a guy. He's not going to leave the animal there. The chusha, it's too weak, not worth anything. So pasik shadila lekalva. But what he'll do is then, okay, fine. If it's too weak, it's not worth much on the market. But at least cut off that piece of loose flesh or limb and give it as animal feed, give it to his dog. It's keeping it sar bal chaim, since there's sar bal chaim cutting it off the animal who's tied there. Lo, but he won't do that. It can't be mitzar chaim. Many times Rav Shapiro said that sar bal chaim is not one of the target mitzvahs, but it's still considered a deraisa. Or a bird that nests in the window. So that also diminishes the size of the window for the tumah. The more the park well, the bird will just fly away. This is bakosher. The bird is tied there. So shachalei, again, maybe he'll shech the bird. If it's kosher, the answer is b'tamei. We're talking about a non-kosher bird. So he'll sell it to a guy. But klinisa is a very small bird, very weak bird. That's not worth anything in the market, like we said before. The animal of kochish mode. It's not right for anything. So Yavle the Nuka, you'll give it to your kid to play with him, like your kid's toy parrot or whatever. The Masarat, it'll scratch the kid. You won't give it to him. In other words, you're not going to use that bird at all. So Klinsalam started, but a small bird that's called the Klinisa, which is very weak, not worth anything, that doesn't scratch. This is Kain place. It's not really a Klinisa. It's not that particular kind of bird. It just means it's a very small bird, but it scratches. Okay, so therefore you're going to leave the bird in there, and all these things diminish the size of the hole so the tumah does not transmit from room 1 to 2. What about a guy sitting in the window? The guy sits in the window, that also makes the window smaller. Remember, a guy is not metame midaraisa. So, but if he's sitting in the chon, the guy's got to get up and walk away. Why is that considered a permanent part of the structure to diminish the size of the hole? Because again, the guy's tied there. I mean, somebody has to feed him, right? But he's tied there. Okay, he's tied there, but his friend will come and untie him. Metzora, he's a leper. Nobody wants to get near him. So another Metzora will come and open it. I mean, this guy's going to be released. He's a prisoner of the king. He's a prisoner of the government, and you're not allowed to touch him. So again, we're talking about if you can have all these weird situations where this item or this person or this animal is stuck at the window, it's not going to be moved at all, then it becomes a permanent part of the wall. Uben Shmona, an 8-month-old baby on Machalon, Osi Ime Idar. What do you mean? Mother comes, she'll pick him up. The Shabbos. On Shabbos, when the baby's considered muksa because he's considered like a dead person, he can't live, and therefore can't move him. The time we learned in Shabbos, Ben Shmona Harei Ke'evan, it's like a stone, but also Talto, it's muksa. The top of Shabbos because of muksa. But his mother can bend over umenikos and nurse him ne'asakana because she is full of milk. In those days, they didn't have what they call pumping and things like that, right? So it was dangerous for her not to feed the baby. So she could just bend over. She shouldn't move the baby. Melach, if it's salt, he said salt also diminishes the size of the hole. Chazilei, when you're going to use the salt, you use it to make a motzi, you use it in cooking. Whereas it's very bitter salt, so you're not going to use it chazilei, so you can use it for hides, for tanning. This bay coats it's got thorns in it, and therefore it's going to scratch you. You're not going to use it. Keeping the kosher lakosa el shakla, yes, but the salt is bad for the wall. Salt also is one of the things that you shouldn't put near a wall because it's going to hurt the wall, hurt the dirt, hurt the wall. Even the kosher lakosa shakla, he says the yasbachas is sitting on a shard. In other words, it's not directly sitting on the wall in the hole that we're trying to diminish. It's not sitting directly on the wall. That would hurt the wall, damage the wall. But it's sitting on a shard. So let the shard itself be the partition. Why do you say that you need that the salt is a partition? Because you're not going to move it, you're not going to use it. It's bitter and etc. It's got thorns in it, etc. All these things are not but it's bad for the wall. You're going to move there. He says, no, it's sitting on a shard. But the shard itself should be a chatzitza. This is less by shiura. It's too shiur. It's too small. In other words, it's like it's so small it has no purpose. And Tosas puts in the gear so ukiretanan. We learned in Shabbos how much there's different shiurim. What's carrying on Shabbos? It's got to be a certain shiur, a certain measure. So it says in Shabbos cheres, how much of a kli cheres, how much of an earthenware vessel is considered carrying on Shabbos? Because they've eaten vein pizza mechavero. To put between one post and another. If they had a window in a wall, they would have posts there and one opening for the air to come in. But they used to put earthenware vessels at the top and the bottom of these near the top and the bottom between the posts and cement it in to give strength to the wall. So Tosa says that yes, what does this have to do with Shabbos? Here we're talking about our issue here is in all these things, are you going to move it or are you going to leave it there permanently? And all these things we're saying, you're going to leave it there, right? So why isn't the chaspa, why isn't the earthenware vessel itself considered a separation? Because it's too small. It's not a kli. It's just a shard. The answer is it's so small that it's insignificant. So Tosa says the insignificance has to do with Shabbos. This business. He just says pirish ein shir lechaspa l'may miposech defach. But look at saying kidded tanan. The minions what does it have to do with shir Shabbos? Shir Shabbos is one thing. Here we're talking about are you going to bother moving it or not? Since it's so small, you're not going to bother moving it, so you're going to leave it there. So the whole point over here is that if you have salt sitting on a shard, on a wall, in the hole in the wall, you're not going to move it. The salt's not injuring the wall because it's not directly touching the wall. And the shard that it's sitting on is going to protect the salt, it's going to protect the wall from the salt. So why isn't the shard itself considered a chatzitza, a partition? Because it's too small, it's insignificant. Like we see other ways, on Shabbos also, you see that a shard that's very small is not considered significant for carrying, but not that because by Shabbos you see it here too. We're just saying that it's small. That's it. What about kli cheres? Another thing we said in that Mishnah was right. We said that ukli cheres for Sefer Torah. A kli cheres, right? Chazila, you're going to take it. You have a kli cheres, an earthenware vessel in the hole there. Why do you say you're going to leave it there and that's going to diminish the size of the hole so it's less than a tefah? Obviously, it's small kli cheres, but you're going to use it, aren't you? Admit, no, it's very dirty. Chazila, a cupper could use it, to hold the blood or whatever that it shouldn't drip down. The benakav, it's got a hole in it, so it's worthless. Sefer Torah. If you have a Sefer Torah there, you're going to leave there. Probably also a small Sefer Torah, diminish the size of the wall. Could have been that the hole was wide, but not so tall. So you need to put a tefach both directions. So Sefer Torah, why do you say you're going to leave it there? You're going to read from it. That's fully it's worn out. But then you have to store it away, like bury it. That's where you're going to leave it. Leaving it doesn't only mean underground; it just means in a wall also can be permanent. Amarav. B'cholos mechitza, you can make a mechitza out of anything. A mechitza here for tum or whatever. Chutz mi melech v'reveb, except for salt and grease, right? Because both of these things will wash away, will become decomposed. Neisha melech mispaza, the salt scatters about and doesn't stay, and reva and the grease melts. Shmuel Rafila melech. Shmuel says you could make a separation with salt. Amar Papa Lubik no machlokas. Hav melech damas, hav melech istrognas. So istrognas is what we call regular table salt. Istrognas was the name of a place probably, but it means table salt versus melech damas, which is large, salty, very thick. And that's the reason why we have my machronim, because of melech damas, very strong, very very salty salt and very thick. It's called stomas because it came from stone, presumably, right? Some of a koshkev is really really hard, so that's not going to scatter, and therefore that is a separation. Regular table salt will scatter. Hashram Rabba, now Rabba said, Osa Adam Shnei Tzibor Melch. You can make 2 piles of salt. That means regular table salt, Maniach Lein Korah, and you could put a beam across them. Shamelch Mamaras Zakora Vakora Maras Zamelch. We talk about a mavui on Shabbos. In order to make an alleyway that you can carry in Shabbos, you have to have at the opening, which fronts on the Rishus Harabim. You can make 2 piles of salt, regular salt, and put a beam across the top of the two piles, because the beam will keep the salt in place, and the salt will keep the beam in place. Melech, right, supports the salt, supports the beam, and the beam supports the melech. So then that's the case of melech instructions. Even regular table salt can be used. Between the two, when Shmuel said that. Shmuel said that melech salt is considered good separation. That's if it had a beam on it. If it had a beam on it, then it stays in place, it won't scatter. Whereas when Rav said speaking where there was no beam there. We said that if you have a mill, so you have Mishnah said. Let's go back to the Mishnah on Yud Zayin and Aleph. Last part of the Mishnah said, right? And you keep the millstone far away. How far? We said you keep away all these items, right? You keep the gefesa from the wall, and you keep seeds away, and the plow. You shouldn't plow me there because all these things break up the earth around the wall. And you have to keep a rechayim, a millstone, also 3 away from the wall, which is 4 from the upper part. And the same thing with the tanner, 3 menakilya, sheinav menasaf. So here he explains what are these things. My timer. What's the reason why you have to keep away the millstone 3 tvachim or 4 tvachim from the top part away from the wall? Mishum Turai, like we said before, because of the vibrations, the shaking. That's going to hurt the wall. Tanya, we learned shel chamor shlosha, a different kind of a mill. Now, what do we mean by chamor? From Rashi's Mashma, we're talking about that there's actually used a donkey to make it go around. From Tosas Mashma, that the chamor it doesn't mean literally a donkey. It just means that it's that's got a permanent base to it. Like it's right, the in chamor tochen doesn't mean that the chamor grinds it. Ella chamor kore lebinyan eitzim. He calls that the assembly, let's call it the assembly of this mill apparatus is called a chamor because it means that it's got a strong base. So what the reason is my time we learned shel chamor shlosha ministrable, 3 away from the bottom part, the base, shein arba and akelos, which is 4 tvach away from the top, which was smaller. So and over there hasamai tirika, there it doesn't shake. Why doesn't it shake? So according it doesn't shake because it's fixed in the base. It doesn't shake so much. Rashi says it doesn't shake because it's very small. In other words, a regular mill in the Mishnah we're talking about, like a hand mill that you do yourself, that shakes. maybe because it's loose. And this one, which is turned by a donkey, but it's very small, Rashi says Rechaim Ktanim B'Kalim, very small and light. When you make the millstone go around and around, it doesn't shake. Elamishum Kola. So in other words, if you say the reason is because of vibrations, what about this other kind of a millstone, which is either run by a donkey or it's got a base, whatever? There's no shaking. The answer is Elamishum Kola because of the noise. The noise is what causes. The reason why you shouldn't do it is because of the noise, meaning the noise is injurious. Some say last Rashi what Mishnah says, the noise of the donkey, that those things are bad. In other words, the noise of the donkey or the noise of the mill is bad for the wall. Now, what does it mean? Why is the noise bad for the wall? So let's take a look back on Daf Yud Ches Amud Aleph, where we referred to this also. We referred back in the top Tosos. It's also referring to the concept of the shaking, right? And then we said, the chiddush is there that tirai kosher, that shaking is good. So Tosos asked, what do you mean? We just changed it. We said the reason it's not shaking, the reason is because of the noise, not because of the shaking. So why did the Gemara over here in Ches say, oh, the chiddush is that's the noise, that it's the shaking, the vibration? Here the Gemara says it's not that, it's because of the voice. But now that we have a little science under our belt, Tosos makes sense, because at the end of the Tosos, take a look at Tosos in the third line from the top of the page in Tosos on Yud Ches Amud Aleph. The lo garsi Ella. If you don't use the word Ella in our Gemara, where we are now in Chafat Beis, Asi Shaper Pacha Telahi Girsa Tiraya B'Kola Chad Taimahu. Now we know when noise makes something shake, right? What does that mean? Because the vibration, the waves, right? The noise, the vibration, that's what makes it. It's one thing. So now in our Gemara, go back now where we are on Chaf Amud Beis, before the two dots there, 3 lines above the Mishnah. He says, not Ela Mishum Kala. He takes the word not Mishum Kala, like Rashi's Girsa. Rashi doesn't say Ela Mishum Kala, he just says Mishum Kala, because of the noise. In other words, maybe it doesn't shake so much. What's shaking it seems to be very quiet. Yes, but there is some noise, either the noise of the donkey or the noise of the thing. It doesn't seem to shake, but there is shaking there because of the noise. So To's saying, if you don't say Ella, see, if you had Ella, that means, oh, it's not because of the shaking, it's because of the noise. Now we're saying it's not that shaking and noise are two different things. He said, doesn't seem to be a lot of shaking when it's you run by the chamor or where it's smaller, it doesn't have a lot of shaking. Yes, but there is noise there. The noise also contributes to vibration. When there's a lot of noise, everything is shaking, right? That's how it works. So the noise contributes to the shaking. It's one reason. Mishnah went on. Yeah. Yeah, you would think so, right? Yeah. Maybe it doesn't walk around. I don't know how it works. According to Tosos, it doesn't even mean a chamor, right? It doesn't mean that. That's what it seems like. First look at Tosos, you think, why is there a machlokes about that? Right? Chaim shel chamor. Rashi says shel chamor. Chaim shel chamor. Is the argument with Tosos? So at first I thought maybe not, but then the last Rashi before the Mishnah says Yesh Moshem Kol Hanagas Achamor, right? So we're talking about leading the donkey. So we're talking about a donkey according to Rashi. Says the Gemara, Vesatan Shloshim and a Kilya. Again, you have to remove an oven from the wall. How far? 3 from the base. That's the Kilya, which is 4 from the top. The tops are always smaller, whether it's the millstone or the tanner. Tanner is a big oven. Then you got to move that away. Amar Abai Shmamino, you see Kilya, the tanner tefach. See over here that the Kilya, the bottom part, how much bigger is that than the top part? It's 1 tefach. Nafkamina is for buying and selling. Gemara didn't say this when it came to Shmamino. What you didn't say that, like Tosa says, you didn't say this Shmamino when it comes to the millstone that the bottom one is 1 tefach bigger than the other because that was a double pashut. Here we didn't know for sure. The tanner, there's various kinds of tanner, as we'll see. There's a tanner is a bigger oven. It's again, it's like a kira, like we're going to talk about in the next mission also. The kira was smaller and did not have the shape, and the tanner, it really was an earth. It's not like we think of a tanner the way our concept of a tanner. Their tanner was basically a big earthenware vessel that was big at the top and small at the bottom. Big at the bottom and small at the top, like an oval shape, so that the heat stayed in there. And the kira was straight up, wasn't small at the top, so it wasn't as hot.
They call them like a Dutch oven.
The Dutch oven, is that what they call it? Yeah.
It's a kli.
Yeah, the kli. Yeah. Says the Mishnah. Lo yamad adam tanu b'toch habayis. If you have, now we talked before, the previous mission was talked about, if you're in a chatzer, what you can do, what you can't do. We're going to come back to more stuff that you can do in a chatzer, talking about sharing chatzeros, all these ideas. Don't share too much. When you're in a bayit mishutaf, like Michael called it, right? You have problems. You had a vat bayit, you got other people to deal with. You know what it's like, right? So here we're talking about you shouldn't be able to do something close to your neighbors stuff. Let's say you live downstairs and you have a neighbor upstairs. It makes no difference if he's renting or he owns it. The idea here is that you shouldn't injure him. So the Yamad Tani, you shouldn't put an oven in your house unless there's room on top of the tanur. Gova Arbam is 4 amos. See, you were talking about amos. Arba amos, or when I said arba before, meant arba etzbaot, right? Tfachim is male, and amos and etzbaot are female. So he says you have to have 4 tfachim of airspace, 4 amos. That's substantial. That's like 8-9 feet. You have to have 4 amos above the oven, so that you shouldn't ruin, you shouldn't burn up, the heat shouldn't go up and ruin the upstairs. Hey, maybe let's say you had the tanner upstairs, so you have to have an area, the flooring, which is really on top of the downstairs guy's ceiling, that plaster has to be 3 tefachim thick in order, so you shouldn't burn the guy downstairs. You shouldn't cause him damage by heat. Even if it doesn't cause a fire, but the heat could be injurious. So a kira, if it's not a tanner, the tanner is much hotter than a kira. A kira is a smaller oven. Then a tefach is enough. If you're upstairs, you only need a plaster, the flooring, the plaster of the flooring on your feet only has to be 1 tefach thick to keep damage away from the downstairs neighbor. Now, let's say you followed these instructions, and despite that, the fire that you did cause damage to the upstairs or downstairs neighbor, respectively. If you did damage, this is the advice that we give you. But if you did damage, you got to pay for it. Shimon says, no. The whole point is this: I followed the rules. I was upstairs and I kept 3 tefachim thick, and if it was a kira 1 tefach thick, I followed those rules. It's not my responsibility. That's a machlok between Shimon and Tanakam. Another halacha: you shouldn't open a store, meaning a bakery. A store of nachtom is a bakery. You shouldn't open a bakery. Bakery has a lot of heat. They're baking all night. Michelle's farm or a dyer's workshop, also a lot of heat. Underneath somebody else's storehouse where they're storing grain or fruits and vegetables. Don't. Why? Because the heat is going to cause damage to the man's storage. And also, you shouldn't open up a refus bucker, a cow shed, underneath these things, because the smell can cause, the stench can cause damage. They said the yayin itiro, if it's wine that the guy's storing upstairs, that's okay, because the heat won't hurt the wine, it will help it. Avalo refus bucker, but not a cow shed, because the cow shed, the stench will hurt the wine. Rashi says over here that the concept is yayin itiro. Why? He says because the ashan ain't ashan kashalan, because the smoke is not bad. He says because the smoke from the heat, the smoke is bad for the wine. But Tosa says again, Tosa's back on Yudches in the second Tosa, he says Rashi says because of the smoke, but we've learned that smoke is good for the wine. I'm sorry. He says we said that the heat, and if you open a bakery or a dyer's workshop underneath wine, he says that's okay. He says why? He says because Rashi says here because the smoke doesn't damage the wine, but Tosa says smoke does damage wine. Oshan bare mazik liyayin, the yayin ushan pasal l'nosachim. If you have smoked wine, that's not good for nosachim. So you see that smoke does injure wine. But so Tosa goes on to say, the second Tosa in Yechesam says that the reason is because of the heat. Right? He says, the hezek asher leka, there's not going to be any smoke anyway because there is a ceiling between the first and second floors, right? The reason is because of the heat. The heat is not good for these items, let's say for the grain, etc. But for the wine, the heat is okay. The heat doesn't damage the wine because wine can be improved, in fact, by the heat. So Rashi says that the reason over here is because of the smoke, and Tosa learns it's because of the heat. Says the Gemara. Yeah, you think so, right? But Tanya, Vatanya Betanur Arba Ubikira Shlosha. Now we said in our mission that if you're upstairs and you have an oven, how much room do you have to leave? How much room does the ceiling beneath you, which is your floor, which is his ceiling, above his ceiling, that plaster has to be 3 tefachim, and if it's a kira, it's 1 tefach. We learned in a brisa that if it's a tanner, it's got to have 4 tefachim of sea beneath you if you're on the second floor, and a kira 3. That's talking about if you have a baker's oven, which is really big and they use it all the time. The tanner didon kikira denachtomen. Our tanner, which we said you only have to leave 1 tefach. Our tanner, which you have to have 3 tefachim, is like their kira, which you have to have 3 tefachim. But their tanner has to be 4 tefachim. And our kira only 1 tefach, right? The tanner didon, our tanner, which is 3, is like their kira, right? Because the baker's ovens are bigger and stronger and more and produce more. Leif tachanas. Tana imhaisa refes kedem. Let's say the refes bucket. Let's say the cowshed. You shouldn't open up a cowshed underneath somebody else's grain storage. Let's call it underneath somebody's silo. Right? You shouldn't do that. What happens if the refes bucket was there first and it's okay? You were there before him. Boy Abaya. What Abaya says is, what happens if there's a question of who came first? Meaning, if your refes bucket was there before his silo, fine. What happens if he was just preparing the silo? Kibbutz Baribas. What happens if he was cleaning it out? He hadn't put any storage in there yet upstairs. Kibbutz Baribas somehow. What happens if he made more windows? In a silo, they always want windows so that the fresh air will prevent the grains from turning bad, from rotting. So what happens if he opened up windows? He did more than just cleaning it out. He actually prepared it by just building windows there. Or what happens if you have an achsada which is open, right? Open on sides. It's not all walled. So what do achsada tachas otzer mao? Some take that out. Bana aliyah. What happens if you built the whole structure upstairs for the purpose of the storage mao? I'll take that question stands. In other words, if your kavshir was clearly there before that storage, then you're okay. But what happens if the man had prepared the room for storage? Is that, and before you put your cow shed there, what do you say? These questions stand. What happens if you didn't have grain? You had rather dates and pomegranates, right? Here's the Shem. Is that considered like the beginning of an otzer or dilma? Ain't otzer. Otzer is either grain, wine, or oil. That's what an otzer is. Otzer is like the grain, literally what things that you hide in truma on. The MS, they said behind tiro. If the upstairs storage is wine, you're allowed to put these, let's say, the bakery underneath there, because you can't put a refus bucker because the stench is bad for the grain, but the heat not so bad. According to Rashi, it's the smoke. Tana behind because it improves it. What improves it? According to Rashi, smoke improves it. According to Tosas, the heat improves it. Because that causes it to turn bad, to rot. Our wine, even the smoke, here he says the smoke of a candle, nami kosher is bad. So it depends, I guess, on the times, the kind of wine that they are. Baspasto, that's like asbestos. It's not asbestos, it's aspasta. Aspasta is fodder. It's like grain that was chopped when it was still very young and didn't turn into regular food. It's used for fodder. That's crevice because that also caused that also caused a lot of heat. Because it's moist, and it gets heated up. And it also causes bad smells. So if it's a stench, everybody agrees that's bad. If it's smoke, Rashi says that smoke is bad for the wine. It could be smoke is bad for the wine, but Tosafos says that even if it is bad for the wine, the point is that there's a wall in between. You have a ceiling and a flooring, so the smoke is not going to really penetrate, but the heat is going to penetrate, and the heat is going to normally ruin these things. You have a bakery underneath your storage, but if your storage is wine, then the heat's not going to ruin it. It's not going to be so bad. All right, we'll pick it up from the Mishnah tomorrow, Mr. Shem. Have a good day, everybody.